there everybody, and welcome back to another Blender tutorial. In this one, which is actually going to be a two-parter, I'm going to show you how to make a barrel procedurally, meaning that the modeling is going to be done with geometry nodes, the shading is going to be fully procedural textures in shader nodes. Now why would you want to do this? Well, mainly because you can get variations on the fly, which is why we make things procedurally, but also it's a good life lesson in the sense of if you don't know how to do it, then you're not going to be able to do other things. So I've deleted everything, I've added back a cube, and in geometry nodes we are going to delete the group input. And this is part one, the modeling. So what is a barrel? It's basically a cylinder that has some thickness, like it's thicker in the middle here, and it's made out of planks, and there's a couple things going on. So let's start off by making our plank generator. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to start off with a mesh circle, and we're going to instance on the circle on each one of these points, whether it be 32 points, 20 points, whatever, we're going to instance a plank that kind of curves, and all together they make this cylinder. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, on the circle, I'm going to instance on points a line, and not just any line. It's going to be specifically a curve line, because now we can, control the height of this and all this. But on each one of these curves, I'm going to add a kind of what do they call it? It's not a lathe, but a sweep in a sense. So I'm going to turn this curve into a mesh where the profile of it is going to be a rectangle. And in fact, we can do that right now to not confuse anybody. And this is clipping my chest hair. That's the danger of lavalier microphones. You can lose some chest hair over it. Oh my god, that hurts. So no pain, no gain. This is a painful tutorial. So what was the point? The point was we can take this curve, so we've instanced curves, and turn them into a mesh. So we're going to do curve to mesh using quadrilateral as a profile, which looks weird, but as we bring down the scale, you can see kind of what we're going for. We have these kind of rectangular prisms that create the planks. Now we have a lot of work to do. We need to first of all make it look like a barrel, so it needs to be the right height. We need it to be thicker in the middle. We also need to orient our planks so that they're all facing inwards, because right now if I increase the height, they're all kind of facing the same direction. They're not like radial in a sense. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff to tackle. I'm just going to put that off to the side for now. Let's go back to the simple case. We have a bunch of lines. Let's start off by curving them and having them face the right direction. So whenever I want to manipulate a curve or a mesh or anything, I always use set position. We're going to reset the position of these points. And because these curved lines, each of these instances has only 2 points, we want to add more geometry. So I'm going to resample the curve. So now we have a curved line made up of 10 points that we instance. And we can only look at the single one. I want to give this thing a bit of bend. To do that, I'm going to offset. In other words, I'm going to nudge or shove, whatever, on the x-axis. As you can see, this moves it. And I want to do this variably as it goes, sweeps across, right? So to do this, I'm going to make this a RGB curves. And that's going to be a function of where we are on the spline, in other words, the spline parameter. So you can see, if we look from the side, we have this diagonal line, and we have this diagonal line here, because as we go from 0 to 1 in the factor through the curve, we are shoving it to the x by this much. We can also create bends and different shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the offset to 0, so it's going to be perfectly flat, and then in the middle, I'm going to add a bump, and that's going to be the curvature. To make this perfect, I'm going to set it to 0.5, and then for the height, we can control that later. In fact, you might want to max this out, or nearly max it out, and add a multiplication afterwards so we can control it. So we can multiply it by 0, which is nothing, and then we add more and more curvature. In fact, we can up our resolution of our curve. So now we have a procedural way to control the bend of this, and we now instance this curve on the circle. So for each point on the circle, we get a curve. Now, again, we have the orientation issue where they're all facing the same way, which means when we mesh this thing, all the planks are going to be facing the same way as well. So we need to rotate it. You can see when we rotate on the z-axis, or apparently not, on the y-axis, on one of these axes, maybe it's a combination of x and y, we can get the rotation. Oh no, it is z. We get the rotation for the planks. So I want to do a custom function. It turns out that the way to get these all oriented inwards is if we look at the original circle. These things have normals, each vertex, so the normal is facing always outwards, so it's perpendicular to the surface. So if we use the normal coordinates, each plank is going to face outwards, or in some sense, inwards. Basically the same thing. So what I'm saying is we're going to take our normal coordinates, and this is a trick you can apply all the time. We're going to apply it to the rotation, which seems like it should do the right thing, but you can see it just creates a mess. If anything, this is a cool abstract render. But we want to apply it only to the z-axis or something like that. So I'm going to align my Euler, my rotation, to a vector. And then you just click through these and see which one is correct. So it seems like x happens to be correct in this case, where they're all facing inwards. And now that we have this, we know that width does correspond to kind of the plank thickness in some sense, as you can see. So we have that, and we have the thickness in terms of height and all this. And remember, the number of vertices here is the number of planks, and the less planks we have, the wider they have to be. So we somehow need to add controls for this. So I'm going to go for, let's say, 26 planks. And I'm going to pick the width that makes the most sense. And also, this quadrilateral, which we can see right here, this rectangle that we're sweeping along the curve, we can also customize it too. So the whole thing's procedural. So I'm going to add a fillet, and set this to limit radius, which you can see takes this plank and turns it into a diamond. If I go to poly mode, we can round this out. So this is what it looked like before, and I'm just rounding those corners, which will round the corners of the planks. Now, one thing I'm seeing here is that this barrel either looks too short or too rounded. Let's go with too rounded. So again, we can kind of control the spread of this in some sense. I think I want to take this point and lower it. The curvature is a bit intense. So we do something like this, and then we can multiply it. But you could do an inverted barrel and other things you couldn't do normally. Now, I know what you're thinking. There are gaps in between, but that's what a barrel looks like. It's made out of a bunch of planks, and it expands in the middle because of the pressure. So this is kind of physically accurate. The only thing we might want to control is the number of planks. So let's say that we were to switch the number of planks to 40. The issue is now they're too thick and they're overlapping each other. So we need a function that keeps the same kind of interval spacing between them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this be our plank amount, and I'm going to say that 26 is correct. Like at 26, they're touching exactly where they're supposed to. It's only when we change this number that things mess up. Okay? So with 26 as our baseline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and take 26 divided by this. So right now this is equal to 1. If I was to increase this, it would become smaller because, you know, bigger denominator. But when this is 26, it's equal to 1 with the division. So nothing changes, right? And I want to apply this to the width, which is what we want to change depending on the number of planks. So I take this. It's kind of a complicated concept, but try to follow along. We're going to take the width, which is 0.25, and multiply it by this division number. So again, when it's set to 26, this is multiplying by 1. Nothing changes. And as we increase this, you can see the thickness is now adjusting correspondingly. And as you would imagine, the more planks you have, kind of the less gaps, or the thinner the gaps become. So I'm going to go for something like maybe 32 planks. At this point, you can kind of judge it for yourself. And we can also set the height of this to be a bit taller. And remember, we can always control this. Another thing I want to do is I want to take this barrel and center it, because right now it's like on the floor, which is cool, but we're going to add some more like layers and stuff to it. So let's center it. In fact, maybe the easiest way to do that, there's a couple ways we could do it, but maybe the easiest way to do that is we're going to have the start and the end both be parameters we can change. And instead of saying like go from 0 to 3.5 on the curve, I'm going to say we input a number like 3.5 divided by 2. That's going to be the endpoint. and we take the negative for the start point. So you'll see what this does in a second. So I'm multiplying by -1, casting it to its negative, and putting that here. So you can see what this does is it's basically a height slider, but it keeps it centered because we're going from negative some number to positive some number. So it's twice, if you think about it as a radius, right? 2 times the radius is the diameter, right? We have one height here and one height going negative, which is why I did 3.5 divided by 2. But now this is centered, which makes it easy to add in. Now we need kind of a circular element here and one symmetrically positioned below on the negative side. So you can already see how we're going to benefit from this. So if I take my mesh circle, and I guess we could make a new one, unless I can't even find it. I'm tripping. Here we go. We can also make a function for the radius, but I'm going to keep the barrel as is for now. But you do the same kind of multiplication thing. I'm going to take another mesh circle, was my point, so that we can up the resolution on this one. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe we don't. I'm going to take this mesh circle, but we do need to turn it into geometry, which messes this up. Okay, we're going to duplicate this mesh circle. We're going to give it maybe the same number of vertices. That might be changed later. This one's going to be an n-gon, so right now we have this barrel, and we have this right here. This is going to be the cap. I'm going to extrude it so it has a bit of thickness, and we're going to put a cap on each end of it. Okay, so we take our barrel, and then we join it together with this mesh. So you can see there's something in here, and all we have to do is transform it by moving it up. How much do we move it up? By one of the radii, which happens to be a parameter over here. So I want to, we're getting a bit complicated. What I'm saying is the height of this is determined by this barrel height parameter, right? So what I want to do is I want to make it a function of it. So our translation is going to be the z component relative to this. Now, of course, it looks a bit weird. We fix this by just subtracting by some amount. So we always use the constant from before, but we subtract, let's say, 0.18. And by the way, we can you can see how these planks are open at the top. We can seal those by filling caps. So something like that. Now, if we wanted to get fancy, since we have a bunch of instances, really, we could make it so that each plank is slightly different in size. This might kind of break the symmetry in all this, but you can see we can scale on the z-axis. And if I randomize this, so right now it's kind of messing up our planks, but if I randomize this on the z, so it goes from, what did I do wrong? Oh, we need both of these to be 1, not 0. We can randomize the plank height so that it's not necessarily perfect. This is just a small detail that you're not going to get in other tutorials. It's going to make the barrel look more realistic. Even if you only do 0.98, so there's a 2% difference, you can see now these planks are coming out at different heights. Okay? And again, a lot of this detail is going to come in through shading and stuff like that. Okay, so we want to take this cap and put one on the bottom as well. So here is a trick. We can duplicate it by adding another transform. And maybe, I was going to say we scale by -1 and flip it, but then we have to flip our normals and all that. So maybe we'll just make another one with the same idea, but instead we're going to take the negative height from before. So it's the same thing, but now it's negative. And instead of subtracting some number, we are going to add. So we have a 0.18 buffer, and we are going to stick that here. So if it's unclear what I just did, I basically, and let's update this so it's using both of these. Or what do I want to do? I want to join them. There we go. Now, does that make sense, what I just did? No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. We want to connect this here. So what I just did is I made 2 caps. One of them is up here. The other one is down here. It's the negative version. Now, let's see. Did we not? We did add. Did I want to subtract? No, maybe this is just what it looks like. Trying to figure out if I did anything wrong here. So we take the thing, we multiply it by -1, we add 0.18, which is our offset from before. Seems correct. Okay. I'm trying to figure out why these have different constants. And we could think about that, but I am doing a live tutorial here, so it does tend to get a bit confusing. I think the issue is, yes, it's this extruding by 0.1, which is going upwards. So what I want to do, I believe, is instead of adding 0.18, I want to add 0.28, or no, 0.08, because we need to account for the extrusion from before. So that should look a bit cleaner. And I think that makes sense, right? If I extrude it by more, it goes higher up, as you can see. Okay. So here we have our barrel. I think maybe the final detail we can add is kind of these metal rings that kind of hold the whole thing together, right? That makes sense. To do that, what we can do is we can make another copy of this. Maybe we could do a delete geometry version. So let's see. We have our thing. I want to delete the top. No. The side? Or I want to delete only faces. Basically, I want the ring itself, which is what I'm going for. So I'm going for only faces. There we go. You thought you liked only fans. Only faces. So delete the top. Points, face. There we go. So this should have gone rid. When we don't have this, we have a top cap for this, and now we don't. Oh, and by the way, this reminds me, let's go back here. Is this kind of a hollow thing? That seems alright to me, but maybe there's an argument to subtract 0.01 again. Oh, I see the issue. I see the issue. We want to scale this by -1. And then we don't need to do that, invert that, account for that thing. There we go. Basically, I just flipped the thing. Don't worry about it. We're doing it live, boys. We're doing it live. So either way, we take the thing. Now we have a ring, because I took this and deleted the top as the selection. And what I want to do is I want to take this and join it with everything else. So you can kind of see in between the gaps that it's kind of there. We need to position this so it's at the top, and one at the bottom, and this is going to be our metal thing. So there's a couple ways to do this. I think maybe the easiest, maybe we could just use a transform node. All we need to do is scale this up on the X and Y axis. So I'm scaling it until it's kind of hugging our thing, as you can see. And then I'm going to move it upwards by some amount. I mean, I guess we want it to be a function of this. So maybe we could do the same thing where we take this and subtract some amount, and this could be the height. We're getting really complicated here. I'm just making sure our barrel's like completely procedural. So I want this to be on the z-axis, and I'm thinking the subtraction basically says it starts up here, how far down do we want it to go? So let's go with a 0.6. That kind of looks correct. And I'm going to scale it so that it's roughly the correct size. Now, we could do some fancy stuff with ray casting, whatever. I'm not going to do that because this tutorial is already insanely long. So I'm going to extrude this, not by individual, but by the whole thing. Scale it down, and now we have our metal ring, which looks pretty good. We could try smoothing it a bit with a subdivision surface. 2 levels. And now we have something that looks a bit more like a ring. And we could add a bit of edge crease to change how much that smoothing is going to take place, that geometry smoothing. Either way, what I want to do is I want to make a second copy of this. Now let me try now doing the other way. We could make a copy of this where we scale it on the Z by -1. And then we flip the faces, so we're taking advantage of the fact that this is symmetric to the origin. And I'm flipping faces because when you scale by -1, the normals get inverted. So let's see. Yeah, that makes a ring down there. You take it, and I guess you add it to the join. And now we have both of these. Let's make sure our faces are oriented correctly. Yes, we want all blue. And on the inside, either red or blue. You know, kind of depends if it's hollow or not. Okay. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to get rid of face orientation. Again, this is the kind of thing that will look way better in render once you have all those shadows and everything. Let me add a bit of environment lighting just so we can see what's going on here. And I want to see if we're done modeling or if we want to add a couple more details. Okay. So again, I think this is so far not only a procedural barrel, but it's one of the most detailed barrels because it has like, you know, some of the planks are inwards, outwards. If in fact we could do something crazy where some of the planks are further outwards, should we do something like that? I feel like we should, right? If we're going to go all out, let's go all out. So we're going to take our instance on points. Again, we are sampling a circle and instancing curves on it. What I want to do, so we're going to get a bit crazy over here, but it's for realism. I'm going to, anytime I want to modify something, I use the set position, that's the rule, and I want to offset it by a random function. I want to offset it by the normal. So right now it's going to expand, as you can see. So here's the previous version, and we're expanding relative to the normal, so it's growing. But I want the amount that it does that, vector math scale, how much it's doing that. So you can see now we have a thing to control that, to be a random value function, which creates kind of this like circular star looking thing. So when it's set to 0, we have a circle, and as you add a bit of randomness, it adds that, which, again, we have these curves. It's going to kind of reposition them a little. So let's see what this looks like. Oh yeah, now we're getting that realism. So again, just to show you the difference, since I can see it immediately, but it might not be obvious, this is when the barrels are all aligned. And as we increase this, you can see the barrel's almost kind of breaking apart, but you don't want to do it too much so that it goes past the metal ring. But this lets us change the seed and get different barrels each time, and maybe we should add a seed to both of these to create different barrels. So we add a seed here, add a seed here. This is the randomization of the scale. You can see now we're getting different plank distributions in terms of height and expansion. Okay, now again, a lot of the details we're going to add in here are going to be in shading, but I'm trying to think, do I want to do anything else here? Maybe I can make these metal parts shade smooth. In fact, could we set shade smooth to everything, or would that break the look? It would break the look here. But maybe what we can do is we can shade based on a selection. So we shade smooth relative to an edge angle. This may or may not work. So we're going to take the unsigned angle. So this is basically when you take the normals and you say only smooth, auto smooth based on this angle, where we're creating that with math. So I'm going to take the unsigned angle, and we're going to see where it's greater than some amount. So that seemed to do it, but now our thing isn't smooth. So let's go for a less than. So this is smooth, and we just want to find the cutoff where that is no longer smooth, but this is. Okay, perfect. And I think what this is it's slightly less than pi over 2. So pi over 2 makes it so that right angles are still smoothed, which includes the top of this, but you bring it anything under that, and that will get rid of it. Not bad. Could we add more randomness? Yes, we could actually also close the gaps if we wanted to. Now, do I want to? I don't think I do. What I would do is I'd do a set curve radius function that, just like we did the offset, by the way, don't forget we have controls over a bunch of things like this. I guess we should have this, the metal rings scale proportionally, shouldn't we? Right? Okay, let's do that. Okay, we're going in the weeds here. So we're scaling based on some number, which happens to be 1.16 for this one. Let's create a value, 1.16. For both of these, we take it, we scale it by, again, it's that same thing with that division from before. We're going to multiply it, so when it's set to 1, nothing changes. Is that right? This should be set to 1. It should be a function of this. So right now it's kind of set at 0.59, so that's our base. So just like before, I'm going to divide 0.59, 0.59, so it's equal to 1, and we are going to multiply that here. Now let's see if we broke it or not. It did seem that we did something to break it. So we should have multiplied by 1. Well, why not? 0.59. Oh, it's because it's a function. Like it's not just equal to a single value. Is that right? So we take this, we multiply by 0.59. Does it change if we flip it? It does not. Ooh-wee. Okay. Maybe what we can do. Oh, I think I know what we need to do. We need this to be a parameter that we can control, do the division thing, maybe flip it. I'm exploring with you guys, and that seems to work, right? So as we increase this, well, it should be, oh, is it doing it? Oh, it's doing the opposite of what it needs to do. Should we flip these values? Yeah, that seems correct. It just seems to expand it a bit too far. So maybe instead of multiply, we add. And let's see, does that? That seems to, you know what? Sometimes you just gotta give up. I'm going to, basically the way I would do this, by the way, is I'd do a ray cast. So that no matter how big this is, it's projected on here, and then we do an extrusion. But for now, let's keep this as is. But we could return back to this. Somebody in the comments will tell you how to do this for sure. But now we have a barrel. So I changed this. Now, did we make this a function of height? Yes, we did. We did. So you can see these metal rings change with the height. So we can make a little stout barrel. We can change the seed. I don't know why I made a duplicate, but we can change the seed, do all that. So now we have a different distribution. And at some point, maybe I'll add this off camera. I want to add a ray cast to control this. Basically, what you could do is you could sample the radius of points near the thing and then do a transfer attribute. But I think we're already going for already like 30 minutes. Main controls, let's isolate them. We have the height of the barrel. We have the seed of the barrel, and that's the seed of the planks. So that's making new barrels on the fly. We also, by the way, should probably save barrel. We also have a bunch of parameters in here, right? Like we can control the radius of this. Maybe we could have people input this in custom. So it's not like 100% procedural, but like you can make it work, right? So for example, what I'm saying is if you increase the thickness, you could also increase the metal rings by some function. I wonder if it's as simple as like just take it and multiply it by 2. Because it does seem, let's see, when this is set to 1, can we set, no. Okay, it's not that simple. Okay, so we have all these functions. Anything else, or all these parameters, is there anything else I want to be able to control? Not really. So what do we have? We have the metal size, the height, plank distribution. Oh, the plank number. We did a lot of work on this plank number. Not to be confused with Planck constant. And that we put a lot of work into to make sure that it works procedurally. So let's try something crazy. 4 Plancks, too few. I think we need a minimum of like 16 or something. But as we increase this, I don't know why it just died right there. But as we increase this, it's still going to have the nice randomization that makes it look good. So I think 32 is our number. So we can take all these, you can do them as a group input. I'm just going to put them in a frame, and that's Shift P. Okay, so we have our procedural barrel. Next episode, we are going to shade it, I guess, right? Okay, cool. thank you for watching. By the way, if you want the blend file, because I know you don't want to necessarily make this yourself unless you're following along, you can get that via the Patreon, and you can get early access to tutorials and all this. So if you like what I do here, you support what I do, Patreon is the way that I'm making a living off of this. So even $1 means the world. Thank you so much for supporting, for watching, and yeah, even watching to completion is a big deal. Share it with your friends, make a barrel, link this video. I don't know. See ya.